While others missed the moment, these leaders saw the signal and made the bet. In today's episode, Nicole Eck, the Chief Strategy Officer at the ALS Association, reveals the bold bet that her and her colleagues made to move away from focusing on the short term to focusing on the long term and the change they wanted to drive in the world, which is to make the ALS disease livable. Welcome to This Way Forward with Charlie Newark-French. My guest today is Nicole Eck. Nicole is the Chief Strategy Officer at the ALS Association. The ALS Association has the mission of making ALS a livable disease and helping to cure it. Nicole, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me, Charlie.
I think you know the format today. We're trying to have a 10 to 15 minute discussion, all centered around a strategic bet that you and the ALS team made. If you're up for it, let's dive in. Tell us a little bit about ALS and the bet you made.
Absolutely. The ALS Association has been around for around 40 years. Certainly, people fighting ALS, we've been fighting it a lot longer than that. So unfortunately, there is no cure as of yet, and it is still 100% fatal. So it's one of those diseases that really brings people together and brings a lot of passion and energy around it. And I would say that the association is probably at the center of all of that fight, meaning we're the largest organization in the world fighting ALS on every front through our advocacy efforts, through our research efforts, as well as through our day-to-day care services that we offer to people that are fighting this disease right now. So our strategic bet has been rather a big one. We set a very bold goal based on, I think, some more recent history that you may be aware of. We were the beneficiaries of an amazing, incredible social media adventure called the Ice Bucket Challenge.
I remember it well.
Yes, most people do. It was the second largest social media event of all time.
Wow.
And we raised $115 million in about 60 days. This was not exactly our plan.
Yep.
At the same time, it was an incredible gift that came worldwide, and it completely changed the landscape of ALS research and care. And it came with a lot of responsibility to our community to really make those dollars work and to move this mission forward. So we made a lot of thoughtful and significant investments with this money. We've tripled the size of our clinic network, as an example. We've tripled the size of our research budget. And we've seen a lot of progress through that. And this really led us to setting this bold goal that you described of making ALS a livable disease. And the word livable has been a struggle that I'll describe, I think, a little bit for people. But we set this goal to make ALS livable by 2030, which is very ambitious. And it needs to involve the entire community. We could never achieve this alone. But we're leading and also participating in a global effort. And we really had to reorganize ourselves in order to achieve it. Had to build more measurability and accountability into our plan. Resetting individual prioritized based on the premise of, is this making ALS a livable disease? And making sure that our day-to-day was all about that. And then we really kind of went into some significant organizational change in order to, have a more strategic mindset and organize around the plan itself. That's kind of the basic strategy bet. So
yes, the bet here was to make ALS livable. What was this sort of counter to that? Like, what was the other option on the table that wasn't maybe as bold or as interesting? And what did it sounds like the Ice Bucket Challenge and the money that came in from that was a bit of a trigger for going after something ambitious. But what made this like the non-obvious choice? What was sitting there as your backup option, if that makes sense?
It does. I think the backup option for a lot of people, or at least a lot of the organizations that I've been involved with in my nonprofit career, have been a lot of times around revenue.
Yes.
We need to raise $300 million by next year, or we need to invest this amount of money by this time.
Yes.
Making ALS livable, it was very, very different. We had to almost explain to ourselves what that meant.
Yeah.
I recall a dear colleague of mine who lost his son to ALS, and he used to say that making ALS livable to him meant when he was when his son was on his journey with the disease, he would say, "If we could just stop it right here, we could figure this out, and we could live with this." And
Mm,
as his son would progress, they would say it again and again and again, "If we could just stop it right here, we could live with this." And so that's kind of how we sort of convened, I suppose, around this livable idea, this concept. No one had ever really thought. Even a few years ago, it was sort of inconceivable that ALS could be a chronic disease or it could be prevented or even reversed or cured. So that's why it was not obvious.
So I'm guessing you got pushback from somewhere. Um, were you getting pushback from, I don't know, donors, like large donors or internal team of saying that like AIM is nonsense and you should, as you say, focus on like this revenue goal and that's just a much more tangible way of doing it that other charities focus on? Was there a pushback or was this an easy path?
I think there was probably more excitement than pushback because it
Mm,
was such a different way of thinking about it. But there's also, a great deal of skepticism and cynicism in the community that is completely understandable because there has been so little progress over the years. But we have seen, and we felt emboldened to be able to take this leap because we have seen so much progress in the last several years.
mm,
We actually have a drug on the market now for people with a particular version of ALS with a gene called SOD1. And this drug called Cosati is actually being found to reverse some progression, meaning it's either stopping progression or it's reversing symptoms, and people are regaining function. So
mm,
we felt like it was possible. As far as pushback from the community, think it was really around the word livable. And what does that mean? What does it mean for me? What does it mean for everyone? And what we've tried to explain is it's not a singular definition. It's really what it means to you. So persuading some of our staff as well who this is their life, right? This is what they do every single day. And I would say a lot of the persuasion was around how we had to organize ourselves to make this happen. So our staff was definitely a big part of that discussion,
yeah.
right? How do we organize ourselves and hold ourselves accountable?
For me, I mean, I'm not close to ALS specifically, but for me, that a part of the concept here is giving people hope. Like that's what's a concept that's caught up in the word livable in my mind.
It is.
Just a side question here. How do you think about, from a charity perspective, the concept of competition? You're out there with a whole load of people who are all trying to solve the same thing. How do you work with those ultimately like partners? Although in a for-profit world, they'd be considered competitors. Tell me a little bit about that.
It's a great question, and I would say we've really this livable concept has
Mm,
become, I think, part of the language of the full community, including our call them competitors, but the other ALS organizations in this space, I think, have kind of rallied around this concept. We are collaborating in a much better way these days. I think, as overall scientists generally are. I think years ago, in the 80s and the 90s, there was more of I think, a competition among scientists of like, well, this is my data and I'm not going to share it. And now I would say that's changed quite a bit. Scientists are sharing their information with one another, and organizations like ours, especially in neurological diseases, we're dependent on each other, and the
totally.
progress that we're all making. And
Yeah.
so the collaboration, I would say, is much, much deeper than it once was. And in fact, we are holding a conference just in a few weeks.
Yes.
Many of these other ALS organizations will come together and
Yeah.
discuss how we're making progress.
Yes. I've heard about the conference. I think it's going to be a good one.
It is.
Um, uh, how did you mentioned 2030 as the goal here for making
Yes.
ALS livable? How do you know whether you're on track? What are the signals you're looking at right now?
I think the biggest signal that we've had is a few years ago we lobbied Congress actually to have the National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine take a look at specifically the progress in the area of ALS, and are we making the right choices? Are we moving in the right direction? Do we have the right strategies in place? And they did a really deep level of research that took quite a bit of time, and created a report basically making recommendations about how they thought we should approach the disease. What was interesting, it was very much aligned with our strategic plan. Now, certainly we collaborated with them on this, we were part of the discussion. But at the same time, it really validated that 2030 was actually possible because we are seeing so much progress in the drug space, in the drug pipeline, as well as in technology. And then, in addition to that, the other ALS organizations also rallied around this specific report, and I think got on board with it. And we're now kind of sharing information for, what are your abilities to do this part of the plan, right? This is something we can't do or we can't, build around, but can you do this, right? So we're kind of now sort of sharing the load, if you will, specific to the recommendations in this report, which again is really aligned with our plan. So I think that's really the biggest way that we've known that we're on track.
Yeah.
Um, and then we do a lot more analysis and review. We sit down and we look at our plan now on a regular basis. And I would say in my 13 years at the ALS Association,
Yeah, I
it's
saw
the
that.
first time that we've made that a real practice. So.
Yeah. Since you made this strategic bet, or any time across the last 13 years, have you had any moments of doubt? This is just not achievable, this is not going to happen? Tell me about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's always moments of doubt because 2030 is literally right in front of
Oh,
us,
it's
right?
close. Yeah, there's a
Close.
lot to
And
do.
so early adoption of, I think, the day-to-day operational implementation was a little slower than we would have liked. Um, you know, Being flexible is difficult for any large organization, but we were also going through a merger. We were a federated structure, which meant it's kind of like a franchise model where you have organizations all across the country that are on the ground delivering local services. And we merged into a single corporation over the course of about 3 years. Um, Merging 20 organizations into one in 3 years is very difficult. But if we didn't do it, we wouldn't be really operating on the same track and moving in the same direction. So I think there were a lot of moments of doubt of one, could the merger actually be successful? Which we're now really finding and hitting our stride, and we're finding that it has been successful. Um, but it was also just the chaos of it, right? And can we still do what we set out to do with some of these challenges? I would say the other moments of doubt are current. The current financial and political climate is extremely challenging,
Totally. Yeah.
and just negotiating with Congress to stay
Yeah.
relevant.
Uncertainty and turmoil. I'm sure that's hard, makes
Exactly.
it hard to make long-term decisions.
Yeah, I mean, just you talked about competition earlier. It almost feels like you're in competition with other diseases to remain relevant,
Yeah. 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 Oh, yeah. Didn't
to
even think
keep
of that.
your NIH funding and to keep your CDC funding and so on. It
Yeah.
feels like a real fight. So this is probably the most significant moment of doubt that we've had because
Mm,
there's so much at risk, particularly with the NIH and the threats to cut a lot of research there.
yeah. Um, I do think the uncertainty right now is a tough one, but it sounds like your team is very good at navigating these tough decisions. Nicole, this is exactly the kind of conversation our listeners like hearing. Your big strategic bet here with the ALS Association was moving away from these short-term goals like revenue or how much you were going to raise, and really thinking about what the giant change you were trying to make in the world, which was to make ALS a livable disease and ultimately cure it. I hope that you and the team are immensely proud of everything you're doing. You're having a huge impact on many people's lives. So thank you for the time today, and thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate being with you today. I really do.
Thank you, Nicole.